Good evening, traveler. Imagine for a moment Frodo and Sam, those most unlikely of hobbits, walking with small steps through a world that seemed far too vast for them. And imagine Sauron, the shadow looming behind every move, waiting for the moment when the One Ring would return to his hand. We all know their journey to Mount Doom, where the fire of Orodruin burned as the only possible end. But what if I told you that not everything was so firmly sealed? That behind the Trail of Ash lay other hidden roads, forgotten shortcuts, choices that might have completely altered the course of history. It is here that imagination stretches its wings. Some believed the One Ring could have been carried to the shining shores of Valinor, dissolved under the light of the gods of the West. Others whispered of Tom Bombadil, that strange being who laughed in the face of power and seemed to care nothing for the ring's weight. There were even those who wondered about the lost art of the Elven forges, or the ancient flames of dragons. All these ideas sound as though they had been dreamt up in a lively gathering at the Prancing Pony Tavern, and yet each holds a glimmer of plausibility. The curious thing is that Tolkien not only knew of these shortcuts, but left them in plain sight, as if waving towards possibilities that might have been, but never were. And now it is your turn to set out on this journey. If you delight in uncovering the stories hidden between the lines, in revisiting Middle-earth through new lenses, this is the place for you. Take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with fellow lovers of Tolkien's tales. In doing so, you help keep alive that flame of curiosity that fuels each story and help ensure that none of these paths are ever forgotten. So close your eyes for a moment and feel the night settling around you. The hills of Middle-earth soften into shadows, the wind carries whispers of ancient tales, and in the distance you almost hear the roar of a dragon or Bombadil's far-off laughter. Every detail beckons you to cross the boundary between what we know and what we might have discovered. Breathe deeply, allow yourself to rest, and come with me, for from here on, it is as though we were unfolding a secret map of Middle-earth, and the first line begins exactly like this. What if I told you that Frodo's journey to Mount Doom was not the only path that could have brought an end to the One Ring? Among the many hypotheses that might have changed the fate of Middle-earth, one of the most alluring, and one of the most dangerous, is the idea of taking the One Ring across the seas to Valinor, the blessed realm of the Valar. If the elves still knew the straight road, the secret way that opened only to elven ships, carrying them beyond the circles of the mortal world, why not place the ring upon such a vessel and entrust its fate to the powers of the West? Would not Valinor, cloaked in purity and eternal light, be the one place where Sauron's malice could finally be dissolved? The logic, at first glance, seemed unassailable. Rather than violent destruction, one could speak of purification. The ring, saturated with hatred, would fall under the influence of an environment untouched by the shadow, and its essence would fade away. Some believed that before the serene power of a man, the ring would become inert, like a soulless piece of gold. Others dared to go further. Perhaps the smith of the Valar, Sauron's master in ancient days, might undo his work. After all, if anyone could annihilate the artifact completely, it would be he who had once taught the enemy the secrets of his craft. But here begin the hidden dangers of this hypothesis. Valinor was not an armory or a fortress, it was a sacred sanctuary, untouched by the taint of the world. Since the downfall of Numenor, the access of mortals had been barred, and even the elves only sailed there in their final departure, leaving behind the burdens of Middle-earth. To bring the ring to the gates of the West would be like bringing a venomous serpent into the heart of a flawless garden. None of the Valar would consent to allow a work of Sauron to cross the borders of the blessed realm. It may seem harsh that the Valar would so firmly refuse the burden of the ring, but the memory of ancient history explained their decision. Whenever the powers of the West crossed the bounds of their retreat and intervened directly in Middle-earth, the result was disastrous. At the end of the First Age, their war against Morgoth destroyed Beleriand almost entirely, drowning realms and cities beneath the sea. And in the Second Age, when the kings of Numenor dared to defy the Blessed Realm, the Valar surrendered the world to the judgment of Eru, and the very shape of the earth was changed, the proud island sank into the depths, and the path to a man was removed from mortals forever. In the face of such memories, the Valar learned that their direct intervention did not heal Middle-earth's wounds, it only deepened them beyond repair. Elrond himself, at the council in Rivendell, echoes this principle: those who dwell beyond the sea would not receive it. For good or ill, the ring belongs to Middle-earth. It is for us who still dwell here to deal with it. His sentence reflects not only a practical decision, but a cosmic truth: the evil born in Middle-earth must be faced and overcome upon its own soil, not exported as a burden for others to bear. Beyond the moral impossibility, there was the practical risk. Sauron, watchful as a sleepless shadow, would not overlook an attempt to cross the seas. His eyes were fixed upon the havens, his winged wraiths scoured the skies. The sea that had once been a path of hope for the elves would become the Nazgul's hunting ground. An expedition to the west, carrying the ring, would have every chance of turning into a trap. If the artifact were seized during the voyage, it would fall back into Sauron's hands, and this time there would be no power to stop him. There is also a spiritual dimension that renders this alternative unsustainable. The very idea of introducing the ring into Valinor poses a dilemma. The sacred land was not made to be a vessel of corruption. Since the rebellion of Melkor, the greatest fear of the Valar had been that the poison of the shadow might seep into a man. To allow the ring to enter would reopen old wounds and expose the undying land to the same peril that had devastated Middle-earth. It was not merely prudence, it was the preservation of the balance of the world. Thus, the wise rejected this path. Not out of lack of power, for surely the Valar could have annihilated the ring, but out of principle. If the war against Sauron were resolved solely by divine hand, the peoples of Middle-earth would remain forever dependent upon external forces, unable to grow or to resist on their own. Tolkien, as a weaver of myths, understood this deeply. The struggle against the ring needed to be fought where evil had arisen, and won by those who still breathed the mortal air of Middle-earth. Thus, the route to Valinor remains a shadow of possibility, fair and tempting, yet fatal. It is an example of what Tolkien's legendarium teaches us: not every solution that seems easy is true. The straightest path often leads to the abyss. And in this case, carrying the ring to the undying lands would open the door to an even greater imbalance, perhaps an irreversible one. Purity is not preserved by mixing with corruption, it must be defended, and evil undone in the place where it was first wrought. In the end, the idea of taking the One Ring to Valinor reveals the central tension between redemption and destruction. Could evil be purified, or only eliminated? Tolkien answers with clarity: some works are so steeped in darkness that they cannot be redeemed, only undone. The ring had no place in the West. Its story, and its end, were bound to the fate of Middle-earth, and there it must be fulfilled. Among all the figures that dwell in the vastness of Middle-earth, few are so shrouded in mystery as Tom Bombadil. To the eyes of the hobbits who met him, he seemed but a merry old man, dressed in blue and yellow, singing playful rhymes and strolling through the fields with light steps. Yet behind his almost comical appearance lay a disconcerting singularity: the One Ring had no power over him. No shadow, no temptation, no weight ever touched the spirit of the one who called himself simply Eldest, the Oldest. This peculiarity opens a question that has intrigued scholars and readers ever since the character appeared in the Fellowship of the Ring: why did Elrond's council not seriously consider entrusting the ring to Bombadil? After all, he was immune to the artifact. In his hands, the ring became a mere object, unable to dominate or corrupt. What for Frodo was an unbearable burden, for Bombadil was nothing more than a toy. This absolute indifference suggests an alternative solution that might have spared Middle-earth its most dreadful journey, making Tom Bombadil the keeper of the ring. The reasoning seemed sound. If no one else could resist the call of the One Ring, here was one who not only resisted, but simply did not care. Bombadil desired neither power, nor glory, nor dominion. His essence was rooted in being, not in possessing. In his song and in his land there was an incorruptible grace that made him invulnerable to what ruined even the noblest. To leave the ring in his care would mean removing it from the board, neutralizing it without the need for destruction. But the strength of this solution was also its weakness. Bombadil was no warrior, nor a watchman. His immunity was passive. He did not care for Sauron's war, nor for the hopes of the free peoples. He lived to the rhythm of the Withywindle, surrounded by trees, flowers, and songs, untouched by the world's tragedies. To entrust him with the ring would be like hiding a treasure in a magical forest. He would not be tempted to use it, but neither would he trouble himself to guard it against those who sought it. Gandalf himself, speaking of Bombadil after the War of the Ring, summed up this limitation clearly. If all the rest of the world fell, Tom would forget the ring, and only the Dark Lords would remain to remember it. The phrase is revealing. For Bombadil, the ring was no threat because nothing in his nature was moved by the desire for power. But for that very reason, he also saw no need to keep it safe. The risk was evident. A being immune to temptation might paradoxically become the most careless of guardians. There is yet another danger to consider. Bombadil seemed bound to a particular territory, his house, his forest, his river. He did not extend beyond his borders, and within them he remained as unquestioned master. To entrust him with the ring would be to confine it to a safe refuge, but only while evil stayed far away. When darkness spread across all of Middle-earth, Bombadil would continue in his song, perhaps forgetting the artifact that rested on a shelf or lay buried beneath a root. The ring, then, would not be destroyed, merely dormant, awaiting the eager hands that might rediscover it. This limitation reveals something profound in Tolkien's work. Bombadil is, in many ways, a liminal, almost mythical figure, not a Vala, nor a Maya, nor a man or elf. He is a presence that represents the pure spirit of creation, untouched by corruption because he takes no part in the struggle for power. But precisely because he stands beyond the contest, he cannot win it. The war against Sauron required action, choice, sacrifice, things that Bombadil, in his innocent eternity, could not offer. At the Council of Elrond, this truth prevailed. The wise understood that leaving the ring with Bombadil would be to postpone the problem, not resolve it. History shows that evil does not fade by being ignored, it grows in the shadows until someone confronts it. Bombadil embodied the untouchability of nature, but Middle-earth was at war, and its fate could not rest in the carelessness of a detached guardian. Thus, however fascinating, this hypothesis was rejected. In Bombadil, Tolkien built not only an enigma that defies interpretation, but also a symbol. He shows that there are forces in the world immune to corruption, but that precisely because they are untouched, they cannot fight in our place. The burden of the ring could not be entrusted to what stood beyond the struggle, it had to be borne by those still within it. Thus the option of entrusting the ring to Tom Bombadil remains one of the most curious in all the mythology. It is a reminder that sometimes neutrality does not save, it only postpones the inevitable. The war demanded choice, courage, and action. And so the ring could not remain in the hands of the eldest, but had to meet its end in the flames of Orodruin. Among the many alternatives raised at the Council of Elrond, one seemed compelling because of tradition, to turn to the skill of the great craftsmen of Middle-earth. After all, the elves still preserved memory of ancient forges. They were able to restore broken swords, like Narsil that became Anduril, and to preserve works of delicacy that withstood both time and shadow. But if their hands could fashion wonders, why should they not also be able to unmake the most dreadful of Sauron's creations? The answer begins in the nature of the One Ring. It was not merely a jewel or a tool, but a vessel of its maker's very spirit. Forged in the depths of Mount Doom, the gold was infused with Sauron's essence, making it indissoluble outside that primordial fire. No craftsman of the Third Age possessed a power of comparable origin. The elves did indeed sing as they wrought, yet their art was preservative, turned toward harmony and healing. Their songs wove beauty and memory, not destruction. Though they could reforge swords and raise kingdoms, they no longer held the creative fire of the ancient days. But who, in those days, could be considered a rival in craft to Sauron? Few remained. Galadriel and Elrond, keepers of the three elven rings, knew deeply the art of Celebrimbor, yet they were users, not smiths. Their knowledge was great in healing, wisdom, and preservation, but not in reforging something of the stature of the One. Celebrimbor, the last to touch that height of craftsmanship, had been dead for ages, and with him perished the last spark of a tradition born in a region and extinguished under shadow. One name remained, and it was the most perilous, Saruman the White. Among the Istari, he was the most versed in the secrets of all, and his fascination with the art of smithing was well known. In Isengard, he devoted himself to studying the rings of power, even fashioning for himself a ring of craft that swelled his pride. Some believed that Saruman dreamed of rivaling the Dark Lord himself, forging a weapon to match it. Yet his skill was only a pale shadow of what Sauron had achieved. He knew fragments, but not the foundations. The very fact that he desired to replicate the ring's power already betrayed him. Saruman sought not to destroy it, but to imitate it. His ability was not enough to erase Sauron's essence, and his ambition only drew him closer to ruin. There was also a dimension of cosmic hierarchy within this dilemma. The ability to forge is measured not only in skill, but in spiritual origin. Celebrimbor, though descended from Fina, never reached the same power as Orleth's rebellious disciple. Sauron himself, being a Maya, held primordial knowledge that the elves did not possess. He forged not only with his hands, but with the essence of his will. To unmake such a work, one would need a craftsman greater than Sauron himself, and in this, all the smiths of Middle-earth were at a disadvantage. Thus, among the peoples of Middle-earth, there was no living craftsman who could surpass, or even equal, the enemy's power. The truth is that the only being capable of undoing Sauron's work would have been his ancient master, All, the Vala of craft. In All resided the creative spark that had shaped the very fabric of the world, and from him Sauron had learned in the dawn of Arda. But All was no longer present in Middle-earth. The Valar had closed the paths to the west, and they no longer intervened directly in the affairs of the children of Iluvatar. To carry the ring to a man, as we have seen, was impossible both for physical barriers and for moral principle. Therefore, the notion of the forges reveals a bitter truth: evil wrought by a mighty spirit cannot be dissolved by lesser hands. The ring would not break before hammers or common flames, it would not yield to elvish song, nor to the ingenuity of men or dwarfs. Only in the same fire that had given it birth could it meet its end. And so, all the craftsmen of the Third Age, great, wise, or ambitious, were doomed to impotence before it. Since the most ancient ages, the name of dragons has echoed in the memory of Middle-earth as a symbol of destruction and searing power. Creatures forged by Morgoth in the First Age, they combined colossal strength, cruel intelligence, and a devastating fire capable of melting walls, consuming entire cities, and even resisting the fury of elven armies. Faced with such a legacy of terror, a natural question arises: why not use that ancestral fire to destroy the One Ring? If there were flames capable of reducing kingdoms to ashes, could they not also consume Sauron's masterpiece? Popular imagination nourished this hypothesis. During the First and Second Ages, it was said that the breath of some dragons was so powerful it could incinerate even the lesser rings of power. The idea endured as legend, a faint hope that the fire born of Morgoth's rebellion might unmake Sauron's legacy. After all, there was a strange symmetry in the reasoning. If Orl's corrupted disciple had given origin to the ring, would it not be fitting that Morgoth's own creation, in its ferocity, might be able to destroy it? But Gandalf dispelled this doubt with clarity at the Council of Elrond. He declared that not even the greatest of dragons could harm the One Ring. There has never been any dragon, not even Ancalagan the Black, who could have harmed the ruling ring. The statement is categorical. Ancalagan, the most fearsome winged creature of the First Age, whose fall brought down the towers of Thangorodrim and sealed the Valar's victory in the War of Wrath, would not have been able to melt Sauron's creation. If not even the fire of this living mountain held enough strength, no other dragon could. Moreover, the surviving dragons of the Third Age were far removed from the glory of their forebears. Smaug the Terrible, who laid waste to Erebor and spread terror in the north, was indeed powerful, but his fire no longer carried the primordial spark of the great dragons of the First Age. It was a terrible flame, yes, but not of the spiritual nature required to rival the fire of Orodruin. Tolkien suggests that only in the earliest days, when dragons were crafted as Morgoth's direct weapons, could their flame perhaps have affected the lesser rings. But the One Ring would not submit to such power. Within it dwelt part of Sauron's essence, making it immune to any fire but that of its own origin. It is also important to note that dragons, unlike the free peoples, possessed no loyalty or purpose beyond their own greed. To entrust them with the ring would have been worse than useless. It would have been to offer the most destructive creature of Middle-earth a relic of power which, even if it failed to destroy it, could still magnify its arrogance and devastation. There is no doubt that had Smaug ever laid claws upon the ring, it would not have been unmade, but instead turned into an object of fascination and pride. And in his vanity, the dragon might even have fallen under Sauron's will, becoming a servant of the enemy. There is also a symbolic dimension that Tolkien seems to have preserved in discarding this alternative. Dragons were children of Morgoth's discord, creatures conceived to corrupt and to destroy. If they were used to undo the One Ring, it would create a dangerous paradox, evil employed as a remedy against evil. This was not the logic of Tolkien's legendarium. His work insists that true victory is born of goodness, humility, and endurance, not of the manipulation of dark powers. To invoke the fire of dragons would have been to repeat the errors of Numenor and of Saruman, using the enemy's weapons in the name of justice, only to be consumed by them. Thus, the hypothesis of dragon fire proves to be a grand illusion. However much it evoked images of irresistible power, it failed on three fundamental points. No living dragon possessed fire strong enough to touch the ring, even the greatest of the past would have been powerless before it, and, above all, the nature of these creatures made them unworthy of trust. The fire of Orodruin was unique, not only in intensity, but in essence. It was the fire of Sauron's own creative act, and in it alone could the ring be unmade. In the end, dragons remain in the place Tolkien reserved for them, as symbols of terror and greed, not as instruments of salvation. The destruction of the One Ring could never come from their flame. And so, once more, we see that all the solutions which seemed easy, swift, or grand were revealed to be false. The true path to victory did not lie in dragon fire, but in the inner flame of courage burning in small hearts, a spark of humility more powerful than any fiery breath. After all the hypotheses had been examined, Valinor, Bombadil, the Elven forges, the fire of dragons, there remained only one road that rose as inevitable: Mount Doom. It was there that all converged, as though destiny itself had drawn a straight line between the ring's creation and its destruction. Orodruin was not merely a volcano in Mordor, it was Sauron's fiery heart, the place where his will had intertwined with matter, giving life to the most perilous artifact in the history of Middle-earth. The ring was born in that fire, and only in that fire could it perish. The logic, therefore, was not merely practical, but ontological. That which had been forged in the enemy's essence could only be undone in his own forge. No other fire, no elven song, no craft of Saruman or of dwarfs could wield such power. In Elrond's words, only in the fires of Orodruin can it be unmade. This sentence, spoken at the council, is both condemnation and revelation. It leaves no room for shortcuts, it declares that evil must be faced where it first arose. Yet there is something deeper in this choice. Mount Doom is not merely a setting, but a symbol. It represents the womb of darkness, the womb from which Sauron's masterpiece first emerged. To bear the ring there was not only an act of physical destruction, it was a return to the source, a plunge into the heart of corruption to unmake it. Frodo and Sam's journey thus becomes a pilgrimage to the root of evil, an act of breaking the cycle at its source. That is why Tolkien's narrative could never be resolved with the ring lost at sea, forgotten in Valinor, or guarded by Bombadil. Such would have been external solutions, pushing the problem aside rather than confronting it. The choice of the mountain is harsher, but true: evil must be annihilated in the place where it was conceived. Here echoes the ancient mythologies, in which heroes return to the monster's lair to defeat it. They do not avoid it, nor cast it away to another land. The passage through Mordor reinforces this symbolism. The road to Orodruin is a process of purification, in which each step robs strength, each breath weighs like a burden. Frodo and Sam are not only crossing physical ground, but undergoing a spiritual trial. The ring grows heavier the nearer it comes to its natal fire, temptation swells, will falters. The final test demands not only physical endurance, but the ability to endure the absolute nearness of evil without surrendering to it. And at this point Mount Doom also becomes the stage for the final irony. For Tolkien shows us that, at the extremity, not even Frodo could resist. He claims the ring for himself, unable to let it go. Destruction comes not by the strength of mortal will, but through the weaving of fate and providence, when Gollum, in his greed, fulfills a role none other could play. This does not diminish Frodo's journey, but magnifies it. The hero is not infallible, but human, or hobbit, and it is precisely in his failure that the hand of Eru is made manifest, guiding the thread of history. From a narrative perspective, Mount Doom is more than a geographical place, it is the personification of the inevitable. There the whole tension of the tale is gathered. It is the natural end, but also the necessary one. The cycle closes where it began, and the artifact that gathered centuries of fear, wars, and corruption returns to the flames that gave it shape. No other ending could bear so much symbolic weight, nor resonate so deeply in the heart of the reader. Thus we understand that Tolkien's choice was not only consistent with the internal laws of his world, but with the mythic logic of his creation. The ring, being the incarnation of Sauron's will, could not be destroyed by exterior forces without denying the very principle of the story, that evil must be faced and overcome within its own dominion. In the end, the fire of Orodruin consumes the ring, and with it Sauron's very essence is undone. It is an act of cosmic justice, the enemy's creation returning to the void from which it came, swallowed by the very power he believed himself to command. And in that flame, not only the ring, but all the shadow that had risen with it finds its end. After all the alternative paths had been considered, some fascinating, others perilous, all rejected, we are left to contemplate the reason for Tolkien's final choice. If so many hypotheses existed within the fabric of his mythology, why did the author lead the ring's destruction only through Frodo and Sam's journey to the flames of Orodruin? The answer, which at first glance may seem simple, reveals its greatness when we look more closely. Tolkien chose the most human, the most humble path, and therefore the most powerful. Every alternative we have explored thus far shared something in common: it shifted the burden onto greater forces. Valinor represented the gods intervening on behalf of mortals, Tom Bombadil, the neutrality of an incorruptible yet detached being, the Elven forges and Saruman, the attempt to surpass Sauron with craft and cunning, the dragons, the use of evil's own fury as a weapon against itself. All of these options were epic in scale, but none preserved the heart of the story, the victory of the small against the impossible. It was in choosing the hobbits that Tolkien stamped upon his work a message that resonates beyond fantasy. Frodo and Sam were not famed warriors, nor kings, nor sages. They were small, fragile beings who possessed nothing but quiet courage, endurance, and compassion. By placing upon them the burden of the ring, Tolkien declared that the hope of the world does not rest in the hands of the powerful, but in the strength of the humble. This decision is literary, yes, but also profoundly moral and spiritual. The symbolism of the journey to Mount Doom lies not only in the ring's end, but in the road traveled by those who bore it. Frodo does not triumph by indomitable will. In truth, he fails at the last instant, claiming the ring for himself. And yet, the story finds resolution. Why? Because Providence, the unseen thread of Eru Illuvator's will, moves through smaller choices, through chances that seem insignificant. Gollum's role, Frodo's compassion that spared his life, all converge to fulfill destiny. Thus the fall of the ring is not only a triumph but a revelation. Good does not win because it is stronger, but because it endures with humility until the end, allowing even weakness itself to become the instrument of victory. It is in this choice that Tolkien's narrative greatness rests. Rather than construct a solution rooted in the extraordinary, gods, wizards, or dragons, he elevated the ordinary into the extraordinary. The hero was not the mightiest warrior, but the weary and exhausted hobbit, sustained by a loyal friend. Sam, carrying Frodo upon the slopes of Orodruin, is perhaps the most moving moment in the entire tale, for in it the central truth is revealed: it is not great weapons that defeat the darkness, but the kindness that refuses to give way, even when all seems lost. Tolkien could have written a cosmic, grand, and immediate destruction. Instead, he chose the longer path, the most improbable, the most fragile. And with it, he also wrote a lesson about life, that victory does not always belong to the strongest, but to those who persevere, who endure, and who remain faithful to what is good. This choice resonates in every reader, for it speaks not of distant myths, but of everyday battles, of the quiet courage to face the shadows that surround us. In the end, all the other options for destroying the ring become important not for their viability, but for contrast. They show the vastness of Tolkien's world, the richness of its possibilities, but also reinforce that the final decision was the only one that preserved the essence of the narrative. Valinor, Bombadil, the forges, the dragons, all represented shortcuts or diversions. Frodo's path was the simplest, yet also the truest. And this is why, even so many years later, the journey to the heart of Mordor continues to move us. It does not speak only of a magical artifact or a distant war. It speaks of fragility that becomes strength, of compassion that alters destinies, of hope that endures against the darkness. By choosing this path, Tolkien did more than craft a story, he offered a way of seeing the world. Thus the narrative's greatness does not lie in the fire of Mount Doom, but in the fire that burns in the hearts of the humble. The One Ring was destroyed, and with it Sauron's shadow was dispelled, but the true victory was revealed in what remained, the certainty that even the smallest can change the course of the future. And this, perhaps, is the deepest lesson of all. In our own battles, The fire that purifies rarely lies in grand gestures or cosmic solutions, but in the simple, arduous, and transformative journey that demands of us courage, compassion, and faithfulness to the good. It is on this path that we find not only the defeat of darkness, but the possibility of redemption. And so, traveler, as you hear that even in the darkest battles a spark of redemption may be born, let this truth flow through you like a gentle warmth. Imagine that the flames of Orodruin have been extinguished, and now only the quiet of ashes carried on the wind remains. Middle-earth rests, and with it, your heart finds its own rest. So let the weight of the day dissolve like the ring in the fire's depths. Feel the night closing around you, calm and protective, like a cloak embroidered with stars. There is no urgency now, no burdens. Only the quiet rhythm of your breathing, guiding you ever deeper into rest. Sleep in peace, with the certainty that even the smallest gestures, like your rest now, hold within them a quiet power.